All right. Well, hey everyone. Welcome to the first live event of the inaugural Airwiggles audio conference. My name is Greg Lester, and I am the co-founder of Airwiggles, along with my other half, Lewis Thompson. And I just want to give you all a super big and warm welcome to the whole conference. I'm incredibly excited to be there today, and I just want to say thank you so much to each and every one of you for being part of this community and for showing up, for sharing cool things, for being yourself, and making this place really cool to be around. And yeah, this whole week is obviously about knowledge sharing and just sharing the knowledge and wisdom. And so over the next 2 weeks, I want to also thank all of the wonderful people that are going to be partaking in all of this. And with a special shout out to also Lewis Thompson and Asbjørn, but also all of the awesome volunteers. And so what better kind of event or talk to kick off a week of knowledge or 2 weeks of knowledge sharing than a roundtable on teaching. So with me today, I have the wonderful Sergio Ronchetti and the amazing Noah Beazley, and we're going to be talking a little bit about teaching, what it means, how it has benefited and impacted our personal lives and careers, and how you can get started as well. And yeah, without further ado, let's get into it. But first, I also want to say, you can use the chat here, which is awesome. It's so cool to see all the people saying hello. So hey to everyone again. We'll also be taking some questions. We will probably not do it during the talk, just because, especially for me, I get off-railed very easily, and we're trying to keep it to a certain time. But we'll definitely have some time afterwards to answer all of your questions. So if you have any, feel free to put them in, and then otherwise just write them at the end so we can all have a look at them and answer some of them. But yeah, so the first thing is really kind of like, how did we get into teaching and what are our backgrounds? So for me, my name is Greg. I am a sound designer at Soundcuts, and the first kind of experience with teaching for me was making some YouTube videos. And that was very interesting at first. It's horrifying to hear your own voice and be in front of a camera and all of that stuff. But you get used to it and you get better at it. And then as time went on, I built a game audio learning portal, which basically houses a bunch of knowledge and information for people who are trying to get into the game audio industry and trying to get their first job, as well as people who just want to learn about different areas. And as part of that and my YouTube channel, I also started to do reel reviews, as I got a lot of demo reels sent over to me. So basically, then that came also with the collaboration of different guests and just basically looking at people's reels, picking them apart, trying to give constructive and good feedback. And then all of that kind of turned into also when I kind of met Sergio online, and he made me aware of ThinkSpace, to transition into being a kind of part-time lecturer for ThinkSpace, where I did some lectures and workshops, as well as some one-to-ones, and in general some mentoring. And that's also where the three of us then really kind of met and connected properly. And then now we've decided to share a little bit about all of that journey. But yeah, that's kind of my background. So I want to hand over the mic to Sergio.
So you were actually going to hand me a mic for a second. I was like, where am I going to grab that from? That's not.
I've got many around here, so you know.
Hey everyone! This is exciting. This is great. I'm Sergio. I'm a composer and sound designer. I'm also the creative director of a newly founded audio house called Double Jump Audio, which is a very work in progress website. I will release it when it's ready, when I'm happy. I also do a lot of university lecturing on the side. Like Greg said, I also teach at ThinkSpace. And I've also recently moved from London to Barcelona with my wife, which means I'm finding any excuse to put Spanish guitars, maracas, and anything else that's remotely Spanish in all of my music. And at the moment, I'm kind of failing, but I'll find a way. And I got into teaching, and I got into teaching when I was 13 or 14. My first job, my mum got me my first job when I was 13 or 14 years old at a Kumon Math Center. If anybody knows what they are, right? They're all over the place. This Japanese like school of like maths, English, and all sorts of stuff. And then my mum got me my second job because she then started teaching at another after school college. My mum was great. She got me. She's like a hiring guru back then. And again, it was more teaching after school, like 11 plus exams. And through that, I started private tutoring at home because I enjoyed it. I enjoyed it. And it was a great part-time job on the side, especially for a game audio career, which we can talk about later maybe. And I continued right up until a couple of years ago when I started coaching game audio students, and now running my own mailing list and online courses to help beginners find paid work. So I still love it. So thank you, Mom. Noah, how did you get to the heights of teaching that you're at right now?
Yeah, thank you, Sergio. So first of all, thanks so much for everyone for coming. There's so many of you, which is really exciting. It's also really great to see the chat kind of popping off. Yeah, so my name is Noah. I'm based in Boston. I'm a composer mainly for indie games. My most recent game is called Protodroid Delta. It came out about 2 weeks ago. Which was super exciting. Yeah, I have a pretty long history with teaching. So I started out, teaching guitar and ear training a little bit before I started college. Then all throughout college, I was always a music tutor, so helping out with kind of core music subjects to other students. Then after I graduated, I started teaching, a little bit after getting some professional experience. Obviously, I started teaching at ThinkSpace, which is where I met Sergio and Greg. We all teach there in the Masters of Game Audio program. And then actually just 1 semester ago, I started teaching at Berklee College of Music. So I'm there as an assistant professor at the new game audio major. Which has been really exciting and just really, really super fun. I love teaching, so that's kind of been such a culmination of all of it. Great. So yeah, since I'm kind of the last person in the round here of introductions, I'd kind of like to segue to our first topic of today, which is talking a little bit about destigmatizing teaching. So I think there's been a trend, which is really, really great to see, of people talking about teaching in a little bit more of a positive light. I'm sure a lot of you have had this experience of growing up with, this kind of those who cannot do teach idea, or this idea that teaching is like the end of a creative career. And I just wanted to start by giving a shout out to that not being the case, to kind of the mentality that's shifting around it. Just to talk about how, some of your faves teach, people like Gary Scheiman and Mason Lieberman, who have had and continue to have really, really prolific careers in game audio, teach at places like USC and Berkeley. So I think that we're starting to see a shift in starting to view teaching as something that can be a really sustainable addition to a freelance career or any other kind of career. So yeah, let me start with you, Sergio. I'd love to hear from you about how you've integrated teaching into a successful and balanced freelance career.
So like what I mentioned before, having like that part-time job on the side, first of all, just as a job completely separate to what you're trying to achieve in your career, is super important, especially at the start, right? To give you confidence, more than anything, financial confidence. And it just so happened to be teaching for me. But more often than not, I know a lot of people who are in this game audio industry who also teach on the side, because it makes sense. Like, you're learning stuff, you know how to do things more than beginners, and you can teach on the side and support yourself as you go. So that's one way that it's definitely supported me. The other way is, it's funny how as soon as you have to figure out how to explain how something works, you understand it better yourself. It's like when you say it out loud, like reading something on paper for me anyway is great. Fine. I read it once and then it goes straight out of my head. I don't remember or retain a single bit of information. However, if I take that information and like practice it straight away, or repeat it straight away, or teach somebody else about it as soon as I can, I remember it straight away. I retain it much better. So in that sense, learning how to teach or attempting to teach something means that you can better understand it. I'm doing it now with like Fmod videos, and I'm understanding Fmod in ways that I didn't realize I had to. I'm like, oh, okay, so I didn't really get that, even though it's something that I use every day. And now you're trying to explain it, and it's like clearing the cloudiness in your head, maybe, or it's, yeah. So that's it. So saying things out loud, that kind of rubber duck experiment, if anybody understands what I'm talking about, it's talking into a rubber duck and explaining just to hear yourself say things out loud. That's really helped. Do I pass it on, or do you pass it on, Noah?
I think, Greg, yeah, let's hear from you a little bit about how you've integrated teaching into your career.
Yeah, it's definitely, I mean, to build on what Sergio says, for me, similar. When I first started my the YouTube kind of videos, I made tons and tons and tons of notes on various game audio systems and sound design stuff and all kinds of things. And it was just kind of lying on my Google Drive without any purpose. And I was heavily inspired by the absolute wonderful OG Marshall McGee, who is a pillar in the YouTube or game audio community, of course. I think most people know him, and it's hard to get to his level. He's incredible. But yeah, I basically was like, well, I can try and do something like that. And so I kind of put all my notes together and tried to make a video out of it. And it helped me so much in being able to kind of get my ideas into really easily digestible format and just help my communication skills and stuff like that as well. But essentially, in terms of my career as well, it's quite interesting because I'm full-time employed rather than freelance. So for me, all of this stuff happens on evenings and weekends. And so mainly I just really enjoy teaching, especially like giving lectures and stuff, and also the videos and everything. But one-to-ones, mentoring, all of that, it's incredibly rewarding to be able to help people along their journey and to give some of the knowledge that you have to someone else. And I think one of the big things is of course that, which we'll touch upon later, is that, like, first off, when do we need to kind of, when am I able to teach, and also like that imposter syndrome, but we'll cover that later. But it's, in terms of like building it into a career, it's really kind of making it work where if I am doing something in my day job that I find interesting, not as in specific stuff, but general, like workflows and stuff in Reaper, then I might go like, this would be really interesting to make a lecture about. And then I kind of bring it over into here. Or I hold peer feedback workshops, because that's always something that is awesome to do and that is really, really helpful to people. So it's kind of looking at where I can kind of bring in things naturally from my life and my day and help others. And I choose things that I find fun personally, because at the end of the day, we want to be doing stuff that brings us energy and doesn't really like burn us out as much. So it's really important to do it in a way that is fun. And I just want to highlight that as well. And yeah, that's pretty much the main thing. Shoot away, Sergio.
Oh, is it me? Am I going straight into me? Right. So that brings us on to the next kind of idea, which is how can teaching and like help our own education and our own learning, right? So integrating is one thing, and then how can it help? And I kind of touched on that a little bit, in the sense that saying something out loud, talking to your rubber duck in the bathtub, or explaining to somebody else a technique you've just learned helps you reaffirm your own understanding and retain information that you've taken in. And for me in particular, I've come to this kind of this challenge that anything that I learn, anything that I pick up on that I think is like, ooh, really cool, like what Greg was mentioning, like you're in the middle of a workflow and you're like, that was really cool, like I didn't know I could do that. I try to teach that to somebody else like as soon as possible, like within 24 hours. And that teaching could be talking to a friend, or talking at my wife, because she doesn't need to know how to use regions in Reaper in a way that increases your workflow with dialogue, etc., etc. But it's but even that, even just again repeating it to somebody in an interest, and just to be like, I found something really interesting, like here's how it works, and trying to explain it, immediately I retain it way better. And I actually encourage everybody to do that in any sort of piece of resource that it will like help sheet that I give out there, whether it's an email or a video or whatever. And that's because the human brain is wired to memorize things through repetition. Like the best way to learn anything is to do it like once every day over the course of 3 days, and you will notice how quickly it is to retain something. So teaching has helped me in that way, because it also means I understand how I learn. So when I need to learn something properly, I now understand how to retain all that information way better. So that's really helped me. Noah, how has teaching helped your own educational learning?
Yeah, first of all, shout out to our poor wives who need to listen to Reaper and Cubase workflow, and it's just
the heroes.
Yeah, the true heroes of this story. Yeah, so I think the teaching has, you said it really well, where it really reinforces your own knowledge. I think it's really fun to be teaching the courses at Berkeley now that I studied there as a student, and coming to realize that there are some things that I didn't truly fully understand until I had to teach them. So it really makes you think about, kind of deconstruct everything and understand every step that makes up a technique, for instance. I think the real power of teaching comes in getting thrown all these curveballs from people who think about things differently than you. So it really gives you the gift of examining things from a perspective that wouldn't have come organically from your own brain. So that's kind of one of the things I love teaching. The reasons I love teaching ear training is that understanding how each person hears something differently is always like such a fun challenge to try to figure out, one person understands, through this approach, and the other person understands through this approach. And one approach I haven't even invented yet or even thought of, but it's the only thing that's going to get through to them specifically. Just like everyone hears things a little bit differently, everyone learns and understands things from a little bit of a different angle. And so needing to understand and empathize with each one of those angles and know how to explain it in a way where that person is going to understand, really like triple, quadruple, as many ooples as there are in the world, the knowledge in your own mind, because you're not just getting your own perspective over and over again. So Greg, I'll hand it over to you.
Yeah, so I think for me, one of the big things where I've really noticed it so much was doing reel reviews and doing them alone, but also with other people and guests. And it's incredibly fascinating how once you listen to someone's work, kind of you notice all the little things, but then not only do you have to kind of listen out for those things that you would change, but you then have to analyze how, and then put it into words and make that idea, that abstract audio idea, go from your brain, take it out, put it into this kind of awkward form of verbal, words, I guess, and then throw it into someone else's brain. So hopefully, it gets there intact. And so the better that pipeline works, the easier it is. And obviously that's feedback, right? And we have that so much in our daily lives as sound designers and composers, and in this creative industry that is game development and also audio post and film. It's always lots of communication and ideas going around. And so that really has helped me in my day job to be able to give feedback better, but also receive feedback better, because you also know that when you're talking to, or on a live stream where someone is showing their reel, that it's a pretty big thing that they're like putting their work out there. And so it's always for me also like, okay, if someone can put their reel out in front of a bunch of random strangers and let it get picked apart, then I can like stand, my ego can cope with my lead giving me some feedback. But yeah, and just in terms of those communication skills, I think that was really big. And then when it comes to questions, that which kind of leads into the next thing, it's there's such a big imposter syndrome always, I think, for people in these industries, and I certainly have it myself a lot of the time. But often when you get then some questions about a specific thing and in Wise or whatever, and then I'm like, oh yeah, do this, that, and the other thing, and then it's like, oh, I do know something. And so that is also kind of helpful. But yeah, it's really, really helped me in so many different ways. So yeah, I just think it's awesome. And yeah, I mean, imposter syndrome. Next topic, I guess.
Imposter syndrome. Who doesn't love being an imposter? Like, instead of doing their work and getting on with something straight away. Imposter syndrome is super interesting, and I actually love talking about this topic because the more I talk about it, the more I can get over my own topic, my own imposter syndrome. There you go. Here's another perfect example. So if anybody, okay, let's explain imposter syndrome for a second. The thought that you have got to where you are, like, by tricking everybody else. The fact that you're, for instance, you're teaching at this place, or I'm on this project, and I'm like, and everyone's like, okay, great. So, we can't wait to hear your work. And I'm like, these people have no idea. I've just convinced them that I'm a sound designer. I've just convinced them that I'm a musician, and like, they're paying me, and my, and I'm like, yeah, cool. I'm like, do they know? Are they going to find out? It's this weird thing. And really it all comes down to confidence, right? The idea that especially if you haven't done something for the first time, you don't feel confident. You don't feel like you have the right to be there. And it's only natural. And everybody, I keep having this reaffirmed, everybody at every single level of the industry, wherever you are creatively, experiences this. Like, from beginner students all the way up to like the AAA composers that we look up to, everybody suffers from it. And it's not a question of, not to go off on too much of a tangent, not a question of never feeling imposter syndrome after a while, but it's more about silencing that voice as quickly as possible. So I still get it, but I can pretty much tell it to go away very quickly compared to when I was a student, for instance. So it does get easier. And with teaching, of course, you must feel imposter syndrome. The first time you teach anybody something, you're like, who am I? Who am I? I have no right to tell people, like, this is how you do something. But the point is, and this is the simple, true fact, you don't need a lot to start teaching somebody. You just need to know more than they do. So it could literally be anything. You might know something very specific about one little thing, and you know it better than somebody else because they've never done it, for instance. That's enough to teach somebody. That's how it starts, right? So a simple question might be, I don't know, someone says, I don't know how to use compression, to which the reply might be, well, Aircon is putting on a free, webinar this month, and Aiden Hall's talking all about compression later this week, and everybody should RSVP to it. And, Aiden said XYZ on the talk, so you should do this. So instead of saying like, I know how to do this, this is the only way to do it, you're instead saying, I see you have a problem. This is the way that I've learned how to do it, or this is the way that somebody else has done it. And all you're doing is regurgitating, like, repeating information that is right because you're learning it from another authority and passing it on to somebody else. All of a sudden, the pressure is off from you going, this is the way to do it. I'm absolutely right, to this is a way to do it. This is one way to do it. So you're not reinventing the wheel. You're just pushing it along, right? You're taking this pressure off you having to be an expert, having to be this almighty authority on it, and you're just passing on information. Is that similar to what you've experienced, Greg?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, absolutely. And like you said, it never leaves, right? Whenever I work on a new project, as I'm in an outsourcing company, so we get a lot of different work in, and that means you've worked on this genre in this game engine doing XYZ, and now you have to do something else in a totally maybe different game engine and learn all kinds of new stuff and new pipelines and everything. But I think that is also something that is so exciting about our jobs, right? That there's always something fresh. And I think a lot of the imposter syndrome is also kind of like how you look at the situation and being able to trust yourself that you will find a way through this and that you will learn and improve. And yeah, I think one of the things that was also really helpful for me in terms of the imposter syndrome or silencing that voice is that I don't need to know everything. And that for me, especially while getting into game audio, it felt like I need to learn how to code. I need to be able to do Wise and Fmod and Unity and Unreal, and all to a really high standard, and maybe even Godot. And also, I need to know about game design as well, and about level design, and I need to understand what the other disciplines do and how do I communicate with them, and this, that, and the other. And it just becomes this huge, crazy pile of knowledge that is just a mountain that you're standing there and being like, oh God, oh no. And yeah, and once you climb that mountain, you see all the other mountains. And so it's like, it's brutal, right? And I think that at the end of the day, what was really useful is just acknowledging that, I'm not a super technical sound designer. Like, I can implement stuff, but I don't code, for example, and I'm not going to get super heavy into coding, and maybe someday I will. But at the moment, it's not where my fun lies, so I won't necessarily follow that unless I'm really pushed into it. But these are kind of things that have then really helped me. It's like, okay, I really enjoy doing sound design, so that's what I'm going to focus on, and I'm not going to focus too much on the technical aspect. So it's kind of following your own fun, and then also being okay with leaving other parts to other people, because we have experts for a reason. And, like, being a generalist is awesome, by the way. Generalist, well, John is going to give a really cool talk on that soon. But basically, for me, it was really like, okay, I don't need to know how to code. And just acknowledging that was really, really good. And sometimes it's kind of just speaking to people, because living in your head and like with your thoughts, especially when you're working alone, can be quite tough. And so one of the really good things I find is just to go out and speak to friends, especially if they're at a similar level in terms of career as yourself, but also if they're further or slightly, farther back than you. You'll notice that everyone has very similar problems and feelings a lot of the times. And I think just sharing that has been really helpful to me as well. And just speaking to friends and letting them know, like, oh, I feel really overwhelmed at the minute, or, I'm feeling not good enough in this or that. And yeah, I think just being able to share that is just really, really powerful. So yeah. How about yourself, Noah?
Yeah, so I think that one thing that's helped me a lot with imposter syndrome, especially when it comes to teaching, is shifting my mindset to understanding that teaching isn't the end point of learning. So it's not something that you do once you've learned everything there is to learn about a subject. So, ideally you start teaching it when you've gained some experience with it and you have something to share. But ideally, you should always keep your mind open and never think like, no, I'm not letting in any more learning. Now I've reached the point where I've understood everything, and I'm just outputting that to other people. And so, I've had the experience, especially before coming to the US, of having teachers who were a lot more kind of authoritative and had this demeanor that was very like, oh, I know everything. And now, especially being a teacher myself, I can guess that that's probably not always true. That I think there are people who are just like, oh, I can't show that I don't know something, so I'm just going to make it up, or like, not that I'm saying that this is what they were doing, but I think that it's just a much better approach to be transparent about not knowing everything, right? To just lay it all on the table. And so what I've tried to do with my own teaching is, and especially teaching my first semester, I had a lot of situations where students threw me those curveballs, and they were like, something that I'd never thought of. They had a question of, and so I made it a habit to say, I don't really have the answer to that, but that's really interesting, and I'm going to look it up, and I'll have an answer for you next week. Or, hey, I don't know the answer to that. How about we Google that right now? Here's how you troubleshoot things. Here's how you use the internet to find answers to things. And I really hope to kind of spread that attitude. I think, again, just like with destigmatizing teaching, I think we're getting into an era of a lot more openness and honesty and kindness, which is really great to see. All of my like Gen Z students are just so sweet and so kind. And so they just like get it and are nice about it when I'm like, oh, I don't know that. Yeah, it's great to see this happening more and more. I'm glad that we can get out of that kind of old school way of teaching of like, I need to know everything, and more into just kind of empathy and kindness, and everyone's growing and learning and understanding all the time. So I just think that that's a much healthier approach to come to it with, and it helps a ton with imposter syndrome because you don't need to know everything all the time. It's not the end of the world if you don't know something. It's actually a good sign if you can admit to yourself that you still have stuff to learn, and you should always have something to learn. But yeah, I'd kind of like to pivot and take a look at it from the other side of things, which is, when is the right time to start teaching? So it's kind of hard, right? Because we all have imposter syndrome, and if we never think that we've reached the point where we can teach something, so when do we actually know when that point has happened? So yeah, it can be really complicated. I think it's also okay to identify, hey, I'm still at the beginning of the road. I'm still learning. I'm not ready to teach yet. I think that you don't have to take away from this, oh, I need to start teaching as soon as possible, and I should make tutorials and how-to videos. If you don't feel like you've gained enough experience yet, you don't have to do it. It's okay to just keep learning until you feel like, again, not, oh, I've reached 100% knowledge in this thing, so now I'm ready to teach it. You've reached, oh, I still kind of am not sure. That's good. We all experience that, and that's imposter syndrome. But at some point, you'll reach a point where you're ready to pass that on. One shift in mindset that the three of us were kind of talking about in preparation for this talk was just going from here's exactly how to do this thing, and here's just kind of the authoritative way to do it, and you need to do this knob exactly here, and you're gonna do this and that, and if you don't do that, you're doing it wrong. Shifting from that kind of way of talking about things to, hey, here's what I did, and here's the process I went through. Here's the results that I got and what I learned from it, and you can take from that what you want and kind of learn, get to your own conclusions and go through your own process. It's never too early to do that, right? So you might not be ready to be like an authority on a subject, but you can always share the knowledge that you've gained on it with other people. So Greg, I'm going to pass it on to you. When do you think, what are some kind of ways that you use for yourself to gauge that you're ready to teach a subject?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think what you said really resonates with me as well, in terms of kind of, you look at it from how did I do it? And that was similar with the YouTube videos, right? Because I started before I was even in the industry, and I didn't have any experience. So it was really kind of recreating stuff, learning from others, and trying to put that knowledge into something that I could give to someone else. And I think the other thing is with teaching is like that, you might be in university and you're sitting next to a friend of yours who's really good at Wise or Unreal Engine, but you're really good at kind of like compression and all kinds of like actual designing and layering stuff. And then you can teach your friend how to do those things better, and they can teach you how to use Unreal Engine and Wise. So I think like just starting in your very small local circle, and also like, in the comments of posts on Airwiggles and things like that, it's like, oh, I know how to do that in Reaper. That is all kind of teaching. And it's really just the transfer of knowledge and sharing that with other people. And I think like by doing that just in incremental steps and building up to then kind of bigger things like eventually a talk or something, it's all, it all has worth. It's not that one is better than the other or worse. And I think like just answering someone's question is already so incredibly valuable in terms of teaching. And so I think pretty much anyone can do that. But yeah, it's always hard to know when you're ready. And I think one of the big things is just to kind of share your experience, share your lens of it, share how you do it, and what you learned from the things. And it's really kind of more of a, in the beginning, I think it's very much a documentation thing of like, I did this, I learned these things, and this is how I did it kind of thing. And so I think that's you can even just making notes on that on a regular is really important. And when you're then working in game dev and you've shipped the game, then usually what happens is there's a big post-mortem, and then everyone kind of chips in and you figure out what could have gone better, what did we go wrong, what went really well, and you learn from it. And it's again like a retrospective. And so just doing a lot more of these retrospectives, I guess, on your own projects in your own time and on your own life, I think can be really helpful in priming you for then eventually all of these things. And we have a junior sound designer panel coming up, I think on Wednesday, I believe. And so again, like, I really, really believe that juniors are actually some of the best people to tell other juniors how to get the jobs, because they are really fresh. They just went through the whole thing. They can relate to how it feels to be rejected, all of that stuff, and what it takes to actually get the jobs in this kind of like current year and current season of I guess the game industry, versus someone 20 years down the line. It's like things change, and not that they don't have just as much valuable stuff and feedback to share, but I think really like teaching can happen from a very early point on. It's just more about who you're teaching to, and so it's usually trying to find people who are kind of who don't know something that you do know, and I think that's the main thing. Sergio, what do you think about all of this?
I think it's great. It's all great. That's what I think. It's all fabulous. Everything that we're talking about. I was something that you both said kind of made me realize, like, I don't remember a time when I was like, oh, I'm ready to teach now.
Yeah.
Like that's it. I know enough. Let's go for it. Let's just jump in. In fact, it's always been somebody else external to me saying, you should teach that because that's really cool. So what are you waiting for? And I do it all the time. I talk to colleagues all the time, and they'll show me this really cool thing in Fmod and be like, oh my God, that's amazing. Thank you so much for sharing. Like, you need to make a video and like tell everybody else about that. To which they're like, yeah, I probably should. I've tried and this and that. It's like, that's your inner voice. That's the imposter. And like, so a good signpost, a good sign for like being ready to teach is other people telling you like, you need to share that. That's it. That's amazing. That's what everybody needs to hear. Like, go and teach it. So that's a really good sign, because otherwise you're never gonna like suddenly wake up one morning and be like, okay, I've done enough. Like, that's it. It's time. It's like, it's 7:09 on a Monday and 5th of June. That's it. This was the cutoff. I'm ready to teach now. Let's go. So yeah, that's what I think. I think hearing the external, and that's what we need. We need external people to tell us that, no, you are actually good at this. Otherwise you wouldn't be where you are, or I wouldn't be telling you that you're good at it. So yeah, that's what I think. And aside from making videos, Greg, what else can we do to teach people?
Yeah, so one of the big ones, of course, is what we're doing right now, is giving a talk or having a discussion rather in front of many other people, a roundtable or a panel. And public speaking is terrifying for a lot of people, not for everyone. Some people are just like, yeah, whatever. But for me in the beginning, it was absolutely, I was mortified to be on a stage, especially in a physical space where I could see all the faces and the seats being occupied. And thankfully, obviously, with lockdown and everything, a couple of years ago in the pandemic, everything kind of went online. So I started doing the lectures and teaching all of it online. And so when you only see the number or maybe like the webcams, it's a lot easier to handle, and it warms you up to then in person. But yeah, I recently did a talk at my old university, and it was a full lecture room, and it was absolutely terrifying at first, especially walking into the empty auditorium and saying like, oh yeah, there should be a good turnout. And it was like, oh God. And some of my old lectures were there as well. So that was cool, but extra nerve-wracking. But then once I kind of got into it, it became really fun, and I just had a great time, and I found my flow, and I was prepared. And I think this is the kind of thing is when you're, and there's this great quote which I'll probably kind of butcher here, but it's like in moments of something like high pressure, you fall to your highest level of preparation rather kind of than race to the occasion, I guess. And this is and I love this quote because I have been caught a lot where I'm like, okay, I'll wing it. And sometimes it works, but other times it's like, oh no, I should have prepared for this. And I think when in doubt, over prepare, and then you'll be fine, because then you can just rely on your work that you've already done. And the other thing is just doing. Being able to kind of talk in front of people is such an incredibly awesome skill to have, to do it confidently and comfortably. And you know, before this whole thing, I had some butterflies as well. This is normal. This is good, positive, nervous energy. But once you start, then it's like, oh, okay, it's great. This is fun. And the buildup is always basically doing it. And then you get better and better and better. And it's really the whole experience that I've taken away from all of these different things and doing it is that I feel a lot more confident in myself and who I am, and being able to speak in front of others. And that confidence goes in my daily life as well, and in my job. I'm more confident when we're in a big studio-wide meeting, or I'm talking to leads and directors about a certain feature or something, and it's great. So it's one of those things where, same as in game dev and everything else that you do, experience then gives you the confidence to actually do it and builds you up to it. So yeah, and the question obviously is like how you do it. It's you can get into it in tons of different ways, but also just stepping in front of a camera, for example, or is a great way to start, because hearing your own voice, that's something that especially is terrifying when you're doing it in front of a PA system, and it's like, oh no, I can hear myself, and it really catches you off guard at first. So making some videos or whatever of yourself and then forcing yourself to look at you and listen to your own voice, you become desensitized after a while, and it's like, it's fine. so yeah, it's kind of again, this learning by doing. But yeah, in terms of confidence, this has helped me massively, so I can really recommend it. It's terrifying at first, but build yourself up to it and you'll walk away feeling awesome, especially when someone comes up after your talk, shakes your hand, or leaves a comment and says, hey, I learned something, this was cool, this made a difference. And that's really, I think, you know, what we're all doing it for, is we're trying to make a positive impact and a difference, and be the people who, you know, helped us when we were in that position as well. So yeah, I mean, Noah, what are your experiences, obviously, because of you're now very, very often in front of large lecture halls. So please tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, so actually, before I started at Berkeley, my very first public speaking experience about game audio was going right in the deep end. I submitted a panel to PAX that I thought, you know, would never get accepted because it was my first panel that I'd done. I just brought a bunch of game audio friends, and it was right after lockdown had happened, so it was about how we'd managed to find remote work during lockdown, and how you can kind of approach finding remote gigs. So I was very delighted that our talk was accepted to PAX, and I got on the stage and I was moderating this talk, and I immediately had a panic attack because it was like you said, Greg, it can be really, really jarring to suddenly see this room full of people, because it's empty one moment, and then another moment, you know, speaking of imposter syndrome, it's like, oh my God, all these people came here to hear me, but I shouldn't be giving advice. What is happening? And so, yeah, that was like a real, like, it really hit me all at once. I didn't even introduce myself. I just made everyone introduce themselves as a way to buy time. And by the time they were done with it, I was fine, and we had a really, really great panel. But yeah, you kind of have to have that first time experience, getting really shocked, I think, to kind of get on track to doing more talks. You know, at this point, this is probably like the 15th talk I've done since then. They've been mostly online, and it gets easier every time. So if you're thinking of starting to do public speaking, definitely, you know, Greg's advice to start with making videos is really, really great. That's just, an audience of potentially infinite people, but while you're making it, it's low pressure. It's an audience of one. You just have to like, your own recording enough to go with it. And then ramp it up a little bit. You can start teaching people a little bit more one-on-one, get involved in smaller events, and submit talks to conventions. If you're really thinking of starting to integrate public speaking into what you do, it's scary. The first time is scary. I really recommend panels because you can just say like, "Oh, everyone introduce yourselves," and it's fine. I think for me, the next big thing for me to conquer is giving a solo talk at a convention. That thought still terrifies me, but I know it's coming soon. So
you can do it. I believe in you.
Just at every point, there's always going to be the next big thing to conquer. It gets easier and easier the more of it you do. I'll pass it on to Sergio.
That was great. I believe in you, Noah. You can do it. I'm sure it's just around the corner. I love public speaking. I've always loved public speaking since I was in primary school doing Lambda exams. If anybody knows what the heck they are, Jesus, doing grades in public speaking. Yeah, I loved it. It was great. Reading poetry when I was like 10 years old, to like giving talks now at like conventions and giving lectures and stuff. And it helps to know that you know your information before you give a talk, for instance. That's helped me. So making sure that I know exactly what I'm talking about. That way, when I repeat it, like Greg said, you have practiced it. You're not just winging it. Because like you as well, I've said, oh, I can just wing it. I'm so good at this. Just gonna go for it. And then you just like, what comes next? And then you just, filibustering your own talk because you've forgotten the next point. So having a plan, even if you're super confident about what you're talking about, helps. And again, that once again is like another level of you reaffirming what you understand and what you know, and maybe teaches you how to explain something you didn't know how to explain as clearly before. Again, reinforcing your own learning, reinforcing your own understanding. But it's like everyone you do gets easier. The video thing is a really, really valid technique. I have practiced giving talks in front of my camera and then just watched it back. And it's so nerve-wracking. But like at the end of it, you notice things that you don't realize you do, right? Until you watch it back and you're like, what? I pull those faces? I'm jumping up and down doing star jumps. I don't remember doing any of that part. Like it really helps. And again, there's no pressure because it's just you watching it, right? Or doing it in front of a family member. And if that is scary, it's doing it in front of like 100 people or like 81 people that we have now is a lot less scarier. Doing it in front of one person, if you can do it in front of like your family member or something like that, it's actually easier to do it in front of other people, I feel anyway. Anyway, that's just my experience. It's not the only way to do it. It is a way to do it. Noah, I have a question for you now, because this is an important one, I think. If somebody is thinking about teaching, they like teaching, how do they start looking for what is a teaching job?
Yeah. So this, I think it could be great for us all to kind of answer how we got the teaching jobs that we're doing right now, and what are some ways, formal and informal, to get into teaching. For me, my teaching has mostly been formal. So again, I started out by doing it as a work study position at the colleges I've been to, and so that's a great way. If you're currently a student, you can look into becoming a tutor. Really, really great way to start getting some experience teaching. For the ThinkSpace gig, so that was I got that a couple years after I graduated. So I had worked in a couple freelance projects. If you're going into more formal teaching like that, you're probably going to want a few years of working professionally under your belt. So I actually saw a posting for it on a Facebook group that I was on for composers. This was actually it was a smaller Facebook group. It was like women in game scoring, and I think it's a really, really great example of how getting involved in kind of smaller, more specific niche groups that are relevant to you can lead to work. If you're part of like a bigger groups on Facebook, for instance, where there's like 100,000 members, you're probably not going to see a lot of job postings on there, because whoever posts that is going to get inundated with like 10,000, 10,000 people sending messages for it. If you're in a smaller group, in a smaller community, you're much, much, much more likely to see postings for jobs. So this is how I found that job. Andrea Posse, who teaches at, she doesn't teach at ThinkSpace. She coordinates the courses there. And she's also a great composer. She posted on there and said like, hey, we're looking for more composers, like anyone in this group interested. And I sent her a message. I sent her my resume and some of the stuff I've worked on. We had an interview and, I got the gig at ThinkSpace. So that's how that happened for me, just being a member of kind of a smaller community. And so for Berkeley, I think, certainly aside from being qualified for the role, not to diminish from my qualifications, but I was certainly in the right place at the right time, which is in Boston, which everyone tends to flee immediately when they graduate, and right when this game audio major started up. So, all my friends had gone to LA, they'd gone to New York. Mostly qualified people tend to go to those bigger hubs. And I stayed here right in Boston doing remote work. So by the time this job came around, I got a recommendation from Michael Sweet, who used to be my teacher at Berkeley, and the chair, Sean McMahon. He knew me already from being a student. The entire faculty knew me. They didn't even really interview me. They just called me and were like, "Hey, do you want this job?" Because they knew me really, really well and they trusted me. And I think that's a really great example of how just putting in a lot of effort in in any framework that you're in can lead to a lot of opportunities. So for me, it was putting in 100% of myself into being a student at Berkeley. So the faculty knew me, the chair trusted me. I knew what I was talking about, and that I was here and willing. So that really helped me stand out in the pool of applicants. It doesn't have to be school; it can be any framework. When you really put everything you have into something, and you do the best you can, people will notice and they will trust you and they'll think of you, and more opportunities come up. So that's pretty much how I got the gig at Berkeley. Sergio, how about you? What are some of the different forms of teaching you've done, and how do you recommend going about looking for opportunities like that?
That was a really good story, by the way. I didn't realize that you found Andrea in a Facebook group like that. But I mean, like you said, like what was really interesting was the reputation, right? So building a reputation, and one of the first places you can do that is where you're studying, and that's similar to how I got my first segue into like lecturing and university and higher education stuff, was because I got really friendly with the teachers that I went to literally every office hour they had available, because so few people use them. Like, and in doing so, you realize that they are, they're people, they have careers, they're doing this for a living, and you can ask them questions. And I was very straight with them. I was like, how do you make a living? Do you enjoy teaching? Is this a good place to teach at? Et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And through that, you show that you're interested to people who are potentially in a position to hire you later down in the line or recommend you, which is, again, exactly how I got pretty much every single higher education gig, including ThinkSpace. Thanks to that, thanks to building a reputation in that, study framework, like you so rightly put it. The other form is mentoring outside of it. So before I started doing lectures at unis, I just put myself out there. I was like, you know what? I can coach a few people. I can show them what I've got. Like you said, Greg, it's I think it was you saying that, juniors at the start, they are like right in the thick of it. Like they are getting the opportunities. They remember it's like fresh in their head, and it's still very fresh in my head because I'm only, a few years into all of this. So mentoring was one of it. Just putting myself out there and doing some one-to-one coaching with whoever was interested, basically. And again, a really good way, a really kind of easy proving ground, just talking to one person as opposed to maybe a whole class of people. So mentoring definitely helped, mentoring and coaching. I was almost going to segue into my other point. So before I do, because it's kind of related, like Greg, why don't you get into what you think?
Yeah, I mean, I think for me, it's really also just putting your feelers out for things. So when I wanted to get into more formal teaching, because previously I'd done kind of a lot more informal, like I said, on YouTube and game audio analysis and through Discord and stuff like that. I put my feelers out and I told people, hey, I'd like to get into doing talks and things like that. And so that's also then Sergio was like, oh, I have an opportunity for you. And that's how the ThinkSpace thing came to be. So it's really also just letting people know what you want, or where you're trying to go, and to then put feelers out into your network. And that's where also community plays such a huge part. And teaching really fosters that, because like by helping all of each other, we can all just be better. And so obviously that's where also Airwiggles and Aircon comes in, which is really exciting. And yeah, so I think really just try and get your network to do a lot of the opportunity hunting for you, so to speak. And building the network is essentially just making friends and meeting people and showing up and building trust. And I think building trust has been like a repeating topic here. And it's really just essentially just being reliable, being kind, being the person that people really want to be around. And you know, I think pretty much everyone I've met in this industry is unbelievably wonderful, and it kind of is what goes around comes around. So by putting that out there, you know, you get it back again. By smiling at someone, they will smile back at you, and so on and so forth. And then just by doing good work and showing up, that is then really the rest. So yeah, this industry is big, but also very small, and your reputation always precedes you. So it's just important to put your best foot forward and be kind to others, I think. And then I think a lot is possible, especially when you just spend some time, and it really can. It starts with the small steps of leaving comments and telling people, you know, oh, your work is cool, to then building friendships and connections, and yeah, and then that just snowballs really. And I think that's really some of the advice that I will give that I experienced myself that worked.
And that comes to the next point, which is teaching can come in many different shapes and forms. And the next question is, what were some of the forms of teaching that we've each been involved in? We've kind of touched on that quite a bit in the last point, but I wanted to add my favorite form of teaching, which I didn't realize I had to do until somebody was like, this is also your responsibility. And that is teaching developers how to talk to audio professionals, teaching them how to literally have a conversation about music, about sound, about whatever, storytelling in your audio. And it took me a while to go from my favorite analogy is the fact that I work a lot with the guys, John and Francesco at Fallen Flag Studio. And at the start, developers love to give you, and I get it, they jump straight into the technical terms. They're like, I don't know much about music, but I think I don't like this because of the trumpet that you've put in there. I'm like, okay, cool. There's no trumpet at all, but okay, I'll try and figure out what you're talking about. And it's like, so shifting the conversation from being like, stop trying to figure out the technical thing that you think is wrong, and then talk to me in emotion, right? Because that's what we're both figuring out. We're figuring out the narrative, the story through emotion. So talk to me with emotive languages. So I've gone from them trying to understand what a violin is doing, or if there's a trumpet in a track, or saying, I don't like it, maybe it needs more reverb. I'm like, to the point nowadays, which is, and I'm quoting this, Francesco the other day gave me feedback for a track, and he goes, this is how he wants this song to be. He's like, if I'm eating a sandwich, you want to taste everything coming into your mouth, right? You don't want to eat just the salami and then just the mozzarella and then just the bread. I want to taste it all at the same time in a sandwich, right? I don't want to make the hoagie in my mouth. I want to have the hoagie made for me outside of it. If anybody's watching Always Sunny, right? And funny enough, I know exactly what he's talking about, way more than if they're like, oh, the violin doesn't fit. Like, what violin? Stop it. Stop talking about instruments. Tell me how you want your sandwich. So understanding that you're not just being hired for your audio assets, you're not just being hired for your advice and your specialties, but you're also being hired to show them, to make sure that they understand how to communicate with an audio person, because you're teaching them that, and this is, I think, the most important thing that I've learned over the first of these last years, is that you are both creating things together. It's a collaboration rather than here's your audio work, go and do it. No, we're doing it together. We both have to put the time in. The only difference is that I know how to make it come into fruition, whereas you don't, because you have a different discipline. So that's my favorite form of teaching on a project, I'd say. I'd like to pass this fabulous question. What are other forms of teaching that you've been involved in, Noah?
Yeah, I mean, I think that you summed it up really well. I have mostly done formal teaching. I do also, I love talking to people and setting up one-on-ones when I have time, when people reach out to me. One of my favorites is talking to film people who are getting into games and just being like, everyone's nice here. That's my favorite thing to do. And so that's kind of in a way that I've done teaching outside of formal teaching. But I totally agree with you. If you're a freelancer or any job where you're working directly with a developer, whether you like teaching or not, you're going to be teaching your entire life, because that's always the process you go through with them. Everyone's had a different experience working with audio people. Some people have never experienced working with audio people. And every time you need to teach them anew how to approach talking to you. And I do the exact same thing, Sergio. I'm like, you don't need to know anything about music. You don't talk to me in musical terms. How did this make you feel? And what would you change about it? And usually they're really relieved, because I think a lot of developers can find music stuff really intimidating. So it kind of like takes a little bit of a burden off of them. Anyway, I'm getting off topic, but definitely agree with your approach to teaching developers. Yeah, Greg, anything else to add about this subject before?
Nothing really to add, to be honest. I think you've summed it up all very well, and I'm just gonna segue into the last question, and then we've got a little bit of time for some Q&A, because I already saw some really cool questions in here. So we're just gonna wrap it up nice and neatly. Oh my goodness, it's past the hour now. My brain is starting to collapse. Yeah. So lastly, kind of, I think we've stated a lot of the reasons and takeaways that we've got from teaching, but on top of that, obviously, there's also things like the financial incentive, of course, which was mentioned at the beginning. So there's a lot of things that you can take away from teaching. And I think for me, the top ones are, of course, also like just building the community and your network, because your network is really kind of the thing that will enable you as a freelancer and even as a full-time professional to really have the best time possible in this industry, because it'll get you opportunities, it's your support, and also it's there for you to grab knowledge from and advice. It's kind of the one-stop shop for everything is the network, and that is essentially the community. And so I think we build this again through connections, and sharing your knowledge with someone else is an incredibly strong way of doing that, or vice versa. And so it really is just like the first step, like I said, is leaving a comment under someone's post, whether that is I like this specific thing, or some feedback on how to make this or that better, to answering a question, all the way then to kind of the next step of, oh, I made a cool thing, here's a little video about it. And I think a lot of people get very overwhelmed with that, because it's like, oh no, I have to now record a cool video and edit it and make graphics. Like no, just open OBS, record your screen. You don't even have to talk. Just look at the mute, solo and mute the different layers, show what's happening, show some of the processing you've done, how you got to that. And then if you're brave, you can also record your voice and do some explaining. And those tiny things, they give so much to everyone else, and then also yourself, because all of a sudden, there's that person who's really good at doing XYZ, and we're searching for someone who's a specialist in that or whatever. And so, opportunities can really come from everywhere and anywhere. So it's what you put out there that then gets back to you, and everything you put out there is one kind of one strand of the network of your big net that catches all of those opportunities and everything. And then, just like I said, making friends. So yeah, Sergio, what are some of the things that you have also taken away in terms of teaching for your career and life?
I mean, you summed up the best point about it, which is the sense of community. So I'm not sure I can add much more to that. But the fact that, of all the toxic places that is the internet, thankfully, somehow, like game audio in pretty much any platform is just welcoming, super positive. Everyone's sharing their knowledge. Everybody understands that sharing their knowledge and teaching other people is how they create their own careers, how they grow their own careers, because they get seen as somebody who's willing to impart value to other people, which is all teaching is about, right? Making a video, commenting on somebody else's, you're giving people value, you're adding value to their lives in a positive, useful way. So that's what I love about it. I love that everybody in the game audio is encouraged to be teachers on some level, because it just means that people coming up the ladder behind you have, you know, plenty of rungs to grab onto and follow in the footsteps. Did you want to add anything, Noah, to that?
Yeah, I mean, I'm just glad that we're highlighting teaching as a two-way street. It's not just a service that you're providing for people. You really get a lot out of it, and it you know it expands your network. It teaches you. It can be a day job where you are actively becoming a better composer. And what can be a better setup than that? Yeah, just to talk a little bit kind of about the financial side of it. I think just like with any day job, it makes a really, really good, this is, more formal teaching, less talking about the other forms of teaching. Freelancing can be very, very volatile, right? You might have a really, really great year one year and like a really terrible year the next. What having kind of a reliable teaching job can do is allow you to be a little bit more directed and more picky with your freelance work, because you're not dependent on it to, you're not dependent on it entirely to pay the bills. So I think since I've started teaching, I've definitely had more gigs where I've been like, oh, I don't really vibe with this person, and I'm just not going to work with them because I don't have to now. Or, hey, I would really love to do the music for this, but I'm kind of winding down sound design because that's not really my area of expertise, and I don't really have to do it anymore because I'm just like trying to get as much work as possible out of freelancing. So if you are considering teaching as more of a career path, that's definitely one of the reasons it goes hand in hand so well with having a freelance career.
Yeah, that's awesome. What a great way to wrap it up. And yeah, I mean, it's been really interesting, I think, just hearing about all the different facets and stories, because we all come from different backgrounds as well, and yet we're all kind of bound by these very, very similar experiences that we all have with teaching. So with that said, I want to open it up to everyone else who has any questions for us. We'll do another about 10 minutes of questions, then leave a little bit of space before we are going to continue with the live Q&A with Adele. So if there's any questions, please put them in chat. I have 3 already. The first one being, do you guys have any specific favorite teachers or resources? So Sergio, do you want to start that off?
Oh yeah, the deity, the god, the all-in-one, all-encompassing game audio guru that is Akash the Car. Just he has been one of my mentors. He still is. I've subscribed to his stuff like for years, and I was on his course and everything. I owe a lot, if not everything, about my start to his teachings, his positive energy, his videos, his courses. But even if you can't afford to pay for a course, that it doesn't matter. He has plenty of free stuff. So I highly recommend you go and check out his stuff. That's it. That's all I want to say. I'm just going to give a shout out to credit where credit is due.
I have a much more specific recommendation, which is if you're looking to get into Wise and you're finding it a little overwhelming, Audio Kinetic have amazing educational resources. It's kind of the best kind of course I've seen put out by a company, I think. You can pay to do the certifications, but the materials themselves are completely free. So it's super, super, super step by step. And you kind of download a sample project and work all through it, through the different courses. So if you've opened up Wise and are like, oh my God, what is going on here? I really, really recommend those courses. They will teach you like really, really with just these chunks step by step. And so, yeah, super specific, but just what came to mind for me.
Big shout out to Damien as well, who does awesome live streams for Wise. And yeah, for sure also Akash. So for myself, it will be probably Marshall McGee. Like I said, he was a huge inspiration for me getting into game audio in the first place, and the way he is able to put so much information into like a 6-minute video is just mind-blowing to me, and I aspire to be that good of a storyteller. On top of that, I also want to give a shout out to School of Video Game Audio, who's super active in the community and offering great courses as well. And in terms of resources, going to shout out my own game audio learning portal, which if you're trying to get into game audio, go to the learning roadmap and you'll have a very nice breakdown with tons of different resources from people, but it's all with a nice red string through it, so you can kind of like start from the basics and work your way through up to kind of like creating a portfolio and how to prepare for your audio tests and all of those things. Next question. Hi, I have a question. I'm a teacher, and one of the most important things that I struggle with is that most of what we teach are things with no general consensus. Every professional or book has their own point of view or several forms to think about how to do it. At the end, this is design and art, and we're giving our own opinion. What is your approach? Yeah, so this is an interesting one. So I guess with kind of the question is really how is there like a general thing on how to do it? I think at the end of the day, there are certain things that are very written in stone, like the physics of audio. And so that is not very opinion based. But in terms of how to do sound design or all of these things are very much an art form. And I think when it comes to teaching, the best way is often to encourage people to be curious and ask questions and to follow where their interests are and to give a good fundamental understanding of topics, and then let people dive into it into more granular, I guess. But it's hard. I'm curious to know from you, Noah, because obviously you're at a formal institution, and so it's a little bit different there.
Yeah, it's really hard because video game audio is just such a young form. We've kind of figured out a lot of stuff in film scoring, but video game scoring is actively evolving. So it's really, really hard to come up with a standard. Especially, I've come up across this a lot with loudness in where it's kind of a wild west for loudness out there. So there's some issues like that one where you sort of need to really think about it and decide what your opinion is, what your ethos is about it, and just go with that. I think for other types of things, you can, I want to highlight what we said before, which is it's totally okay to say there's lots of different approaches to this, but this is what I do. When I talk about how to come up with a budget, for instance, with my students, I will repeat multiple times, like, this is what has worked for me, but lots of people don't like to do it this way. Some people do it per minute. Some people do like a package deal. Like here are the pros and cons of each way. You should take away from this the thing that you think is the right thing for you and is the right thing for a specific client. But with loudness, for instance, you just gotta think it through and decide where you stand on it and what you're gonna teach them. But for most things, you can pretty much just give your personal perspective, make it clear that is your perspective.
Nice. Anything to add to that, Sergio?
Yeah, just again, adding to what you both said, that it's a case-by-case basis. Some things, like you said, is just like, this is how Fmod works. This is what you need to know, loudness, all of that boring technical stuff. But the other stuff like pricing and like networking and things like that it really is a case-by-case. There's plenty of books out there, and there's plenty of resources, but it really depends on your exact situation then and there. So it's again, more about opening up to the community and hoping somebody's shared your experience and maybe has something similar that they can help you with, or just simply point you to another direction for you to dig in and do some more research. So yeah, it's totally opinion based. I think for the most part, it's also the most valuable thing is just talking to somebody and encouraging me to make a decision and to go for something, right? Because usually when we're asking a question, sometimes we already know the answer. We just need it reaffirmed from somebody who knows a little bit like more than what we do. And that's been the most encouraging thing for me. So everybody's, for the most part, I realize most of my teaching sometimes is me saying, what do you think? Do you think that's a good idea? Why do you think that's a good idea? Again, being the rubber duck. The rubber duck like exercise is fantastic. I don't have a rubber duck. I used to have a shark. That made me feel a little bit more adult, more manly. If we're still allowed to say manly. Anyway, yes. Case by case basis, I think.
Nice.
Can I tell a totally unrelated story about rubber ducks that has to
Of
do with
course.
teaching?
Of course.
At the end, this is last semester. At the end of one of my classes, a student came up to me and he waited for all the other students to ask me questions and stuff. And he was like, "I have a gift for you." And he gave me like a handful of rubber ducks, like tiny, tiny plastic ducks, and he ran away. Sorry, you jogged this in my memory. I did some investigating after that, and it's like a whole thing. But that was maybe my favorite moment of teaching last semester.
Nothing will ever top that. That's it.
I know. They're in my office now, kind of I put them in a row. I put my ducks in a row. So.
Oh, that's great.
Oh, amazing.
All right. So we've got 5 more minutes, so quick fire now. Do you have any horror stories from teaching, bad experiences that forced you to learn and grow in a difficult way? Well, one time I didn't prepare enough, and then I overestimated my own ability to wing it and got very humbled. And then after that, it was like, okay, prepare. And that was the main thing. It's like preparation is always very key, unless you're mega informed about the subject matter, in which case then it's like, okay, you can wing it because you already have done the preparation in all of those whatever years before. But otherwise, that was my not fun experience. Sergio.
I don't know if I have any horror stories. Maybe like not being prepared. Well, okay. So the year after I graduated, they asked me to give a lecture or like associate lecture kind of thing at my university, which was really cool. There was still some of my peers from like my degree who were still on like the part-time course, so they were there. It was really encouraging to see me there. And then, but obviously again, not preparing enough, and then them asking you a question, being like, "Oh yeah, how much can composers earn every year?" And I don't know why, but I just blabbed out, "Oh yeah, composers can make like quite easily like $500,000 a year." That's no problem. Here I am, like not anywhere near that wage yet. Comfortable, but nowhere near that wage. And after I did, I'm like, why did I say that? That's obviously not. They're gonna realize that's not. So it's like, again, prepare yourself, or you're just gonna blurt out the first thing that comes to your head and then regret it.
Yeah, as for me, I no, definitely no horror stories. It was a really, really hard and intense first semester, a lot of work. But I said it before, but I really love Gen Z. They're so nice. I told all of my classes that it was my first semester teaching, and every one of them clapped. It was just, it was really heartwarming. I was kind of expecting to have some of these horror stories, but I don't. The students have been so fantastic.
Nice. Okay, we've got 2 more. Question 1 is, from an HE point, higher education of view that, from an HE point of view, what are your thoughts about the difficulty of creating long-term goals and continuity in YouTube teaching? Oh, good question. I mean, I think it's really just scoping out it's like building a curriculum or something. And so trying to figure out what you're teaching and then making a roadmap and breaking it down with videos. I think it's same as in that case. And then just planning is really the word, I would say. Planning. Anything to add?
I know that a lot of YouTubers like swear by consistency, and I've only just delved into like a fraction of it, like Greg's been doing, for instance, what amazing work he's been doing. But it like, don't feel guilty about skipping a week because you're not a YouTuber, you're a game audio professional adding to your career. So if I've very quickly said, you start feeling guilty. I haven't planned enough videos. I haven't done enough of this and that. It's like, well, this is extra. If you need to focus on other work because you don't have the time to do YouTube, then that's what you should focus on. That's one thing. And the other thing is having a lot of videos in hand has helped me. Like planning something out and releasing things automatically makes you feel a little bit better about how things are going. And think of it as a direction. The last thing to add, rather than a goalpost, a direction. This is the direction you start at. You might change 2 videos down the line and then adjust and then adjust and then adjust, which can be said about everything game audio career wise.
Awesome.
Noah.
Yeah, you guys have said it great. I don't really have too much to add to that.
Then you've got the last question is for you. Have any students suffering from tinnitus had any effect on your ear training teaching and how it is approached for them specifically or in general?
No, I actually haven't come up against this at all with my ear training students. If you're suffering from tinnitus or hyperacusis, and if you don't know what hyperacusis is, look it up because you may be suffering from it. I definitely recommend looking into tinnitus retraining therapy. Little known fact about me, I wear hearing aids that they have like a special tailored kind of white noise that really has helped me get over my hyperacusis and tinnitus over several years. I take them out to mix, so I'm not doing anything weird to compensate for them. But I just wear them day to day for hours every day, and I don't have tinnitus anymore. And it's really helped me deal with symptoms like that. So if you're experiencing that, look into it. Tinnitus retraining therapy.
I have a question. What if you find regular sounds annoying, like the sounds of doors, the sounds of train doors beeping too loud, the sounds of Christopher Nolan mixes in IMAXs?
You've got to consult your shark, Sergio.
And you just got to deal with it. I get very annoyed at like mouth sounds. I can't deal with them at all. And I think that we're all as audio people just very attuned to all of those things and more susceptible to that. But nothing you can do about that, unfortunately. Not that I know.
I tried. I'm forever noticing noises. Like, what's that sound? My wife's like, what? That super high frequency sound that, and I'll name her the frequency, and you're like, I don't hear it. I said, but I can. Anyway.
Right. Well, thank you so much, both of you, for sharing your knowledge and wisdom with everyone. It was super duper fun. And thank you for all of you who joined, who participated and asked fantastic questions. I hope you enjoyed this little journey into teaching and were able to take some things away from it. And with that said, I want to send you into the next one, which is a really cool live Q&A with Adele Cutting from Soundcuts, who will be sharing a bunch of knowledge also about all things audio. And she is an expert at dialogue and voiceover and all of that stuff. And I'm sure Lewis has some really cool stuff. I believe Lewis is hosting it, so he'll be asking cool questions, and also all of you can all get your questions answered. So yeah, that starts in 5 minutes. So sorry for going over time, but we had so much fun. We couldn't really help it. And yeah, have a great one. Take care and see you all soon. Bye-bye.
Thanks everyone. Bye-bye.
Bye.